Every morning, for almost 40 years, hot water was carried to a bedroom in Windsor Castle so that a dead man could be shaved. His clothes were laid out fresh each day. His room was kept exactly as it had been on the night he died, untouched, waiting, as though he might walk back into it at any moment. And the person who ordered all of this, and went on ordering it decade after decade, was the most powerful woman on Earth. Queen Victoria ruled a quarter of the planet. But on the night her husband died, something in her broke, and she all but vanished from the empire she governed. She vanished for so long that her own people began to ask, out loud, whether their queen was ill, whether she had lost her mind like the mad king who came before her, or whether she had simply stopped being queen while refusing to give up the crown. For a few years, the country came close to deciding it no longer needed her at all. This is the story of the 40 years Victoria spent in black, and everything that the marble image of the stern old Empress was built to hide. Victoria's grief was not ordinary grief. It was total, and it was permanent. In the first days she was, by the accounts of those around her, almost destroyed. She could not face the funeral. She fled Windsor for the Isle of Wight to Osborne House and shut herself away. And then she began the strange, lifelong project that would define her widowhood. She decided that Albert would never really be allowed to leave. His rooms were kept exactly as they had been on the night he died. His clothes were laid out fresh each day. Hot water was brought to his room every morning for a shave that would never happen again. A photograph of him, or a cast of his hand, went with her. By some accounts, she slept beside an image of him above the empty pillow. She had memorial after memorial built in his name. The vast gold monument of the Albert Memorial, the great round hall that still carries his name, the mausoleum at Frogmore where she intended, from the very beginning, that they would one day lie together. This was not mourning that was meant to end. It was a shrine, and she was its keeper. Before we go further into the years she spent hidden away, and the scandal that grew up around the one man who could reach her, take a second to subscribe. This channel is about exactly this: the private wreckage behind the public crown, the human being underneath the marble. If that's the kind of history you want more of, subscribing genuinely helps these stories find more people. For years after Albert's death, Victoria withdrew almost completely from public life. She refused to appear at the ceremonies a monarch was expected to perform. She would not open Parliament in person. She hid at Osborne on the Isle of Wight and at Balmoral in the Scottish Highlands, the two private homes she and Albert had built together, as far from London and its demands as she could get. The public nickname that attached itself to her said everything: the Widow of Windsor. A queen who had a grief and a crown, but no longer seemed to have a throne she was willing to sit on. At first, the country was sympathetic. Grief is human, and hers was real. But sympathy has a shelf life. As 1 year of near total absence turned into 2, then 5, then almost 10, the mood curdled. A monarch is not paid to feel. A monarch is paid to appear, to be seen, to embody the nation in public. Victoria was doing none of it, and the whispers grew into something far more dangerous. The one person who seemed able to reach her in those buried years was not a duke or a minister. He was a Scottish servant named John Brown. Brown had begun as an outdoor servant at Balmoral, a gillie who led the Queen's pony over the Highland hills. In 1865, he was brought south and formally made the Queen's Highland servant, and he rose to become one of the most influential figures in her private household. He was blunt, physically strong, plain-spoken, and utterly unimpressed by royal ceremony, and something in that directness got through to Victoria when nothing else could. He spoke to her like a person, not a monument. He coaxed her out onto her ponies, back into the fresh air, back towards something like life. And that closeness set the whole court, and eventually the whole country, talking. The intimacy between the widowed queen and her Highland servant was so obvious and so unusual that gossip ran wild. Behind her back, people called her Mrs. Brown. There were whispers that they had secretly married, even that they were lovers. It has to be said plainly, none of this was ever proven, and no solid evidence for a marriage or an affair has ever surfaced. What is certain is that she relied on him completely, mourned him deeply when he died, and left instructions that tell you how much he meant to her. What actually passed between them went into the grave with them both. While the Queen hid and the gossip spread, something genuinely dangerous was building. In the late 1860s and around 1870, Britain saw a real surge of republicanism, open public argument that the monarchy was a waste of money and that the country might do better without it. And the case they made was simple and hard to answer. The Queen had vanished, so what exactly was the nation paying for? In 1871, an anonymous pamphlet appeared with a title that cut straight to the point. What does she do with it? It accused Victoria of quietly hoarding the money Parliament granted her, squirreling away a fortune each year while performing almost none of the public duties that money was supposed to fund. It was later revealed to have been written by a liberal politician. For a while, the monarchy's standing sank to a low it would not see again until the abdication crisis of the next century. A hidden queen, a growing suspicion that she was either unwell, unhinged, or simply hoarding money and hiding, and a country openly wondering whether it still needed her at all. And there was a darker fear underneath it, one that touched Victoria personally. Her own grandfather, King George III, had descended into a madness that stripped him of his reign and ended his life as a blind, bewildered old man locked away at Windsor. People remembered. When a queen shuts herself away for a decade, dressed permanently in black, refusing to be seen, the question hangs in the air whether the same darkness had come for her. What pulled her back was a combination of luck, politics, and one clever man. In 1871, her son, the Prince of Wales, nearly died of typhoid, the same disease that had been blamed for his father's death. 10 years, almost to the day. The country held its breath, and the wave of public sympathy for the anxious mother did more to quiet the Republicans than any speech could have. And in Benjamin Disraeli, Victoria found a prime minister who understood her grief, flattered her, drew her gently back toward public life, and gave her a new and glittering role. In 1876, he had her declared Empress of India. The widow of Windsor was becoming an empress. The transformation completed itself in her old age. Her golden jubilee in 1887 and her diamond jubilee in 1897 turned the once hidden widow into the grand, unshakable symbol of the British Empire at its height, cheered through the streets of London by enormous crowds. But look closely at the photographs of that triumphant old woman, and the thread runs unbroken all the way back to the night Albert died. She is still in black. She never stopped. Victoria died on the 22nd of January, 1901, after more than 63 years on the throne, having outlived Albert by almost 40 years and mourned him for every one of them. Her instructions for her own funeral were precise, and they say everything about the two men who had defined her widowhood. She asked to be buried, unusually, in white, rather than the black she had worn so long. Into her coffin, by her orders, went mementos of Albert, and, according to the arrangements she left, a lock of John Brown's hair and his photograph, tucked out of sight where the official mourners would not see them. She was laid beside Albert at last, in the mausoleum at Frogmore, she had built for the purpose the day her real life, as she saw it, had ended. That is the truth behind the marble image of the stern old Empress. Underneath it was a woman who lost the person she loved at 42 and never truly came back. Who kept his room ready for 40 years, leaned on a servant the whole country mocked her for, and vanished so completely that her own people began to wonder if the crown had broken her mind. If this story stayed with you, the next one on this channel goes to the very fear that shadowed Victoria's darkest years. Her grandfather, King George III, the monarch whose mind collapsed while he still wore the crown, locked away and raving in the same castle where she would one day hide. Subscribe to keep following these stories as they come out, and tell me in the comments, was Victoria's 40 Years in Black the purest love story in royal history, or a grief that swallowed a queen whole?